This video is coming out a little late, so I'm just going to keep it to my thoughts instead of a full read through of the TWAB. I'll also give my thoughts on Void 3.0 as well. First off, the increased bonus XP and faster gear leveling was to be expected. I don't see a world where they finally give us legendary campaign and we don't get this without some kind of community backlash. Upgrade mods and Glimmer is a nice bonus. Now all we have to deal with is horrible RNG for gear drops and leveling, because how could you not deal with RNG leveling in Destiny 2? On top of what should be expected, Bungie decided to reward those who complete the entire campaign on legendary with an emblem, a new exotic, a full set of gear at 20 above the soft cap, leading me to believe just playing this story probably won't be enough to get you to the soft cap by itself, some upgrade mods, and some exclusives that are to be announced later on. I never expected them to go that far, but it's nice to see that they're rewarding some of us who take PvE a little bit more serious than your casual player, and we'll see where they go from there for future content. After that, Bungie basically states that it's going to be a little bit harder than a Legend Nightfall. It'll be easier than a solo dungeon or a grandmaster. Enemies will slightly be a little bit more aggressive, have a little bit more of a damage resistance, as well as be harder to stagger. So maybe you might want to bring some high caliber rounds, weapons in there, as well as have match game, because that's probably going to be a thing. And you'll probably be capped at level, so each mission caps your power at raid contest mode basically, and avoid feeling like every step is a grind. Mission will launch screen will have a skull. Play each mission's max effective power. If you're under leveled, be prepared for a bit of a tough fight, but I don't see anyone doing this solo, especially if you're preparing for your raid team. Everyone should have someone to play with. If you don't, there are resources out there. I don't really know what to tell you. At this point, anyone who's been a veteran player, you don't have someone to play with, I really don't know what to tell you. LFG exists. Find people out there. There are plenty of people out there. There are discords out there. Even Bungie has their own discord on top of that. So I don't see this being any too difficulty, especially if you're playing with a fire team. From there, I don't mind having one revive per person. I'm pretty sure they're going to be champions, so I don't see why you wouldn't be able to get a revive back. If not, then, you know, stick close to your fire team. Solo players are going to have just as much of a difficult time as people with a fire team, because, you know, they're increasing the health per fire team member you have, but it won't be 1-to-1 in terms of difficulty. But if you do stray away from your teammates and you get KO'd, you only have like 40 seconds to get your teammate before it's a team wipe. I don't see this, once again, they say it's going to keep a veteran team on their toes, but if you have the right builds, if you have the right playstyle, if you play together with your team often, once again, we have gear that just fucks on enemies. Sorry for my language. I really don't see a real veteran team having that much of an issue. Maybe at the beginning, getting used to enemies' new abilities, but after like the first mission or two, you know, aside from like the small surprises that come, you know, from left and right due to, you know, Savathun's trickery, a veteran team will probably not have as much of a difficulty as a solo player. If you are solo playing, you know, good on you. You won't necessarily have, you know, much of an easier time playing solo, but it won't necessarily be harder on you. And then we basically have confirmation that you have the ability to replay the missions as much as you want after you complete them, as well as do normal difficulty for those of you who aren't really necessarily looking for a challenge on their first go through and you just want to experience the story. That's perfectly fine for me. I'm personally probably going to go for a legendary difficulty, because at this point it's been like 7-8 years playing Destiny. I like the story that they've been able to put up so far, but I'd be lying to you if I said that I checked out. I don't even watch by lore stories anymore. I want to get back into the lore and I want to get back into that, but I'm just here to shoot things with guns that go burr. Sorry if I sound like just a generic Titan to you, but I've been playing this game long enough to where, like, bro, give me cool guns. I want to shoot shit with cool guns, and let's keep it pushing. But hopefully, you know, Savathun or the story this season, you know, makes me get hype. So we'll see. So this is a new Titan exotic, the Loreley Splendor, which will give you the ability to heal yourself in sunspots whenever you create them, as well as whenever you kill an enemy either with your grenade or your melee, these sunspots will actually spawn directly next to you, as well as give you increased recharge, I believe, on your abilities, as well as longer supers and a little bit more damage. That's perfectly great. This makes bottom tree solar titan a lot more viable in PvE. I don't know why you wouldn't want to get this off rip as the expansion goes, or hopefully you get it as the exotic that you get from completing the legendary difficulty story. If not, then you guarantee we'll see me farming for this inside of the legendary lost sectors as soon as I'm able to. They said the playtest name for it was the Stag Spot Helm. Awesome art gives the ability players another choice besides Phoenix Crater. Also, melee builds are becoming more popular and makes higher level difficulty melee more viable, at least in theory, which I believe if you have something like a 1-2 punch shotgun, this will be very great for that in terms of getting rid of mid-tier enemies like orange bars. I don't know if this is necessarily the build that you want to go for in high tier. Definitely something that you may want to be able to consider for grandmasters. We'll just have to see how quick those sunspots heal you in that situation. Obviously, as a titan, you should always be running high, like 90 and above resilience for PvE. This will give you a chance to survive, to hopefully get that sunspot proc from either a grenade or a melee kill. Obviously, in your super, lasting longer, doing more damage, sunspot automatically spawns on you, so that means you're going to be healing yourself while you're throwing your sunspots onto enemies, and you move to the next sunspot. As long as you stay in your sunspot, it automatically lasts longer. So this may make your super last like maybe 25 seconds or more. We'll just have to play test it. As far as my first opinion on this sounds like a really good exotic in theory, like they said, and I can't wait to get my hands on this to see how much it increases the survivability of a titan in PvE. This will definitely be something I will consider for the day one raid, especially if I can get my hands on it as soon as possible. The second titan exotic coming in Witch Queen is the Hoarfrost-Z chest. This one basically replaces your towering and rally barricade and gives you a combination of both in the form of a giant ice wall grenade that you can peek through, and you get all the buffs of the rally barricade, and enemies that get too close to your crystal will basically get slowed, and I'm assuming anything that ends up within your crystal as they spawn will become frozen. This is a really good stasis build and adds to the survivability of Behemoth in PvE. Could also see some play in the day one raid from me. I don't know about anybody else. The crystal ability creating, as you know, with titans shattering your crystals spawns that the stasis shards that give you not only increased health if you have the right whatchamacallit, I think it's Whisper of Rhyme that gives you the overshield. I could be wrong. On top of increasing your melee or decreasing your melee cooldown, as well as if you combine it with shattering crystals, that reduces your grenade cooldown. So essentially, as a titan, you can always have a crystal up, because you know you're gonna have, unless it affects your barricade cooldown, if this doesn't slow down your barricade cooldown, a titan with 90 resilience or above, you're getting this back every 90 seconds on top of ability cooldown for shattering some of the crystals. And there are a lot of crystals that it projects that I've seen. You can cut off basically an entire section in that what was the earth map, Bannerfall, that middle section of B. You can basically cut off that whole entire section by yourself with just one barricade. It's actually kind of nutty, the things that I can perceive you being able to do with this. You can have your ability cooldowns going back to back, from shattering the crystals, getting your melee cooldown and your grenade cooldown, throwing your ice wall grenade on top of that, the damage resistance on top of creating overshields for yourself. It's nutty just being able to think of how much survivability just one exotic gives your Titan on top of your teammates, because they get the overshields as well as the damage resistance, I believe. So it's the implications of how strong this chess piece can become in the right hands. I'm just thinking about it now. And on top of, if we get Diamond Lance back in time, if they fix it, I need this chess piece is basically what I'm saying. These new Warlock boots basically became meta before they're even introduced into the game. I believe they're called the Secant Filaments armor. This one gives you not only the devouring perk, which I believe you don't have to actually be on void for this to work for you, as well as the ability to disrupt enemies. So basically you get overload rounds with whatever weapon that you're using, on top of empowered buff, which I don't remember how much damage you get from empowering rift. Could be 15, something like that. It would make sense if it was 15, but you get overload rounds, empowering rift buff, as well as killing enemies gives you a slight amount of health back. That's pretty OD for a PvE chess piece. I don't know how it's going to help for PvP. I believe overload rounds in PvP reduces or slows down the ability regen as well as super for an enemy. So it slows down their ability to get their melee, grenade, and super in PvP. Who knows? Maybe that might be meta there. But for PvE, these boots are, I mean, they may damn well replace the one that increases your distance of your weapons as well as reload speed for warlocks. I'm sorry, I'm not a warlock main. Sometimes I forget the warlock exactly. But anyway, these boots are good. I could just by reading that, there's no reason for you not to get these boots, especially by the time the Witch Queen raid comes out. And even after that, like, these boots are just strong as hell. So try and get yourself these boots, because I don't see this never becoming useful at any point. Like this, unless they nerf it, that's the only thing I can see would happen to these boots, is they might actually nerf it, but it's strong. These new Warlock exotics are the Osmiomancy Gauntlets for the Warlocks. Comes with the Fervent Cold Snap perk. Basically gives you an additional charge for your cold snap grenades, as well as the second charge charges faster if you make direct impact with the first cold snap grenade, if I understand that correctly. They don't necessarily say anything about being able to have 2 Bleak Watchers up on the field, so I guess that's just up for us to fuck around and find out. Other than that, this is just basically an exotic that does a thing, as well as I believe it makes the cold snap grenade travel faster. And that's pretty much it. Not really much to say. This will definitely be a decent PvP, as well as have some use in PvE. So we will see about that. If anything, even if you can't have 2 Bleak Watchers up at the same time, you can toss one of the grenades, get your second grenade faster, and then use the second grenade as a Bleak Watcher. And maybe if there's like a cooldown timer, you get your grenades back faster on that one. It's definitely one of those ability centric builds that you just have to make work. I don't see this being like a main meta PvE exotic, but it'll definitely have its uses. This is going to be the new Arc Staff exotic called the Blight Ranger. Comes with Voltaic Mirror perk, which basically gives you the ability to reflect supers back, as well as projectiles from enemies, and it does increase damage to whatever you send it back to, as well as you generate orbs, I believe, for directing or deflecting things. This is more of a defensive exotic 4-year super. Honestly, I'll just have to see how it plays. I'm not a hunter main. It looks like this will only be able to be used on the middle tree. Maybe it'll give the other 2 trees of Archstaff the ability to reflect as well, but it's another one of those exotics that does a thing. Maybe it'll be interesting in PvE. Say like if a boss stomp could be reflected, but I don't think that is. It's just projectiles. So we'll just see any boss phases that do, like say in the middle of DPS phase where the boss or enemies basically constantly are pelting you projectiles, and we'll see if you can reflect that with that. So I'm not going to say don't grab this, but this is definitely something that just have to be wait and see for me. And you know, maybe somebody will come up with like a YouTube video or something that'll convince me that this is good. These new hunter exotics are called the Renewal Grasps, which basically gives you a larger dust field and reduces the damage either of your allies, or the damage your allies take if they're inside of your dust field, as well as the damage output of any enemy that is within your dust field. Basically gives the ice hunter, or sorry, stasis hunter, the ability to play support. Unfortunately for me, it feels like hunters got the shorter than the stick when it comes down to the new exotics, but this one seems to be a little bit more viable than the last one, at least for PvE. We'll see how much damage resistance it gives you. I would say probably like 15%, no more than that, maybe even 10. So that's pretty much all I got to say about that. It doesn't really seem too complicated. It's another exotic that does a thing, and whether or not that thing would fit your playstyle will be up to you. For this next part of the video, I'm going to be reacting to portions of this Aztecross video. If you look down here, he did basically a breakdown of everything that the abilities coordinator, I believe, as well as some other members from Bungie who went to the Destiny community podcast. I believe the main guy's name is Kevin Yanes, not Giannis. So yeah, they brought a little bit more clarification to Void 3.0. There's some things that I personally didn't like, but I'm just gonna have to live with, as well as some things that just seem neat. But it's not gonna be like a full reaction to the video. I'm gonna link the video into the description box below, so if you want to see this video for yourself, go ahead. But I'm just going to basically give my thoughts based off of what he was able to pull from that podcast, because it's a long 2-hour podcast and I'm not going to go through that entirety. So you know, he's done the work, so definitely go to his channel. I like his content. Don't forget to like I have done, as well as subscribe, hit the bell notification and all that stuff so you can get more of his content. I personally like Cross as a content creator, so hopefully you like him too. So let's just get to the parts of this video that I may either have contention with or agree with.
It brings up the debuff effect, or the weaken effect, that we can cause with our void abilities. Weaken is a global 15% debuff against PvE targets and a 7.5% debuff against PvP targets. Now Shadow Shot Tether will still remain at 30% debuff.
I personally agree with this decision, where if weaken only gives you a 15% debuff to PvE. As far as PvP goes, I mean, I'm not a PvP main, so that's something that's out of my league in terms of numbers of what's going to be allow you to one-shot people and all that stuff. So you'd have to go to someone like Fallout Place for that kind of stuff. But that makes sense. We'll see how much uptime you'll be able to have on that. From what I hear, you're going to have some decent uptime on your abilities as a hunter. So this 15% debuff may be something that you be able to pull off often, hopefully. If not, then you know, you just work within your means. Probably this gives hunters more reason to run strength builds. There are some decent strength builds that you can run with hunter currently in the game, but this just further gives you reason to do that. On top of, it isn't necessarily hard to get your melee back on hunters. You know, you get your dodge near an enemy while you're invisible, stuff like that, stuff that you know see on a regular hunter doing now. you'll just have more reason to do it with this new Void 3.0 subclass. And then, you know, Shadow Shot obviously is still going to be a superior debuff as opposed to your melee debuff, which makes just perfect sense, because why would you just completely get rid of the purpose of Shadow Shot if you didn't make it that way? So for now, this is something that I don't necessarily have too much contention with. It's more so finding out how you can maintain your uptime with this, as well as being able to constantly spam it, and whether or not you can, whether or not Bungie is limiting your ability to do so. So we'll just have to see for that.
Still. Now at 10:14, it was confirmed that hunters are losing Heart of the Pack. Now Heart of the Pack is actually there on Bottom Tree Night Stalker currently in the game, where throwing a smoke bomb would make you and nearby allies invisible, and then that providing that would grant you Heart of the Pack buff, which would increase things like weapon haste, mobility, recovery, and resilience. Now hunters are losing Heart of the Pack, and hunters will only have one smoke bomb that will apply weakening to targets. Now using Trapper's Ambush is what will enable your smoke bomb to turn you and your allies invisible.
This is more of a interesting change, because now your smoke bomb is just straight up for the utility of weakening enemies. Can't necessarily use it to constantly keep your allies invis like you used to, because Heart of the Pack obviously is gone. You don't get any of the buffs from Heart of the Pack anymore. This is just one of those things where we'll just have to see how it goes. Trapper's Ambush is now for invis on your allies. We'll see how is that going to work. What's the cooldown on that? I want to see how this is going to affect gameplay like Graviton Forfeit, as well as Omni Oculus for PvE and or PvP. Any of the invis hunters, we'll just have to see how that's going to affect them. I do believe you can still use your hunter dodge to go invis, which I believe is later on in the video, but for now this is just one of those things where like I can't necessarily give a full-on opinion until I see how it plays.
Visible. Now at 11:40, it was confirmed that Keen Scout is now a fragment, and that Flawless Executioner is now called Stylus Executioner and no longer requires headshots while crouched to activate. Lockdown is also a fragment. So again, Keen Scout allows you to sprint and sneak faster, and you also gain Enhanced Tracker. That will be a fragment. And Lockdown allows for our grenades to last twice as long, also a fragment.
Again, these are basically good changes that we'll just have to get our hands on to see whether or not we consider these really good. Team Scout change being a fragment, as well as Lockdown. Those are just two different slots when you just had that as a tree. So we'll see how we'll be able to build into that, and it'll probably be really dependent on, like, once again, your ability cooldowns. You may have to sacrifice some intellect in order to be able to do these consistently, especially for team play. Stylus Executioner no longer requiring headshot is a bonus, especially for PvE. He says that they said it's going to basically be depending on whether or not you have them debuffed with weaken or something like that, which is definitely a bonus. How much, I don't think they ever mentioned how much Stylus Executioner buffs your damage. I believe it might be 30%. I don't know how long it's gonna last, so it may not even really be worth specking into if it doesn't last more than like 10 seconds. If the last 10 seconds you're able to go invis and then get that melee off, then we'll see, but arguably not going to be worth it, especially since you don't have Heart of the Pack increasing your resilience, because the moment you get that melee off and a boss knows that you're there, you're going to get stomped on, and lo and behold, most hunters do not spec into resilience, so you're probably going to get stomped on and instantly gibbed, even if you're wearing protective light, because protective light, I don't know how many of you actually know this, doesn't necessarily prevent you from being one shot. It just prevents you from taking any more damage past, you know, a certain threshold that would keep you alive. So it doesn't stop you from getting one shot. It just, you know, increases your damage resistance once you pass a certain threshold. So we'll just see how this is going to be we'll see how it plays. But for now, you know, them separating these abilities and you have to spec into them. It could be a plus, it could be a minus. We'll just have to see. Before we continue, just want to let you know we have skipped ahead in the video. Like I said, I'm not going to be watching the whole entire thing. I'm just only going to be reacting to points that I find either interesting, have contention with, or just necessarily agree with. So we're going to straight to the Titan melee portion. So let's quickly play that.
Void effects. Now again, Titans will have a shield throw projectile melee as well as a shield bash melee. Now shield bash will essentially be the same. It will suppress the target and of course add a weaken debuff to that enemy as well as the surrounding enemies as well. But the shield throw will actually do 60 damage in PvP. This is less than shoulder charge. And they stated that they didn't want the shield throw to be as potent as shurikens and celestial fire were in their prime.
My question with this is, will you be able to throw your shield while you're sliding and then combo into a void shoulder charge? Because I don't know why more Titans don't know this, but even though Bungie tried to nerf the ability to do this, you can still technically slide, shoot your shotgun, and then do follow up with a shoulder charge. So if you can slide, throw your shield, bounce it like around a corner, hit an enemy, and then come around that corner while you're still sliding. Say if you have like the Dune Marchers, which increases your slide distance, you slide around that corner after you throw your shield on the ground, bounce off, get a like 60 hit on the enemy, and then follow up with a shoulder charge. That's automatically an instant kill on the first guy, and then you get weakened on the other two enemies. Now with that weakening effect, you get the Dune Marchers lightning effect, so it's like an instant 3-player kill right there, if you see where I'm going. Now obviously anyone who's like a PvP main hearing this will probably fucking lose their fucking minds, like you can't be fucking serious that you should ever be allowed to do that. But the way my mind's working, obviously I would personally want this for PvE, but I can see this being a real big of a problem for PvP. So I'm just gonna probably have to play test it on the first day, and then, you know, maybe Bungie will nerf it. Maybe I'll put a video out on it, maybe I won't. But that's up for me to decide once I find out, and whether or not someone else who finds out about that, whether or not they want to post a video about that as well. But ideas.
30 minutes, it was confirmed that Ward of Dawn is moving to a tier 1 super, and they stated that considering they actually nerfed the amount of orbs generated by Ward of Dawn with the 30th anniversary, they're not worried about players snowballing with bubble titans inside of PvP. However, a huge nerf, a substantial nerf. Weapons of Light will no longer grant a 35% buff, but instead a 25% buff.
Ward of Dawn being moved to tier 1 is something that just was expected. It's not an offensive super, so there's no reason for it to be any higher in tier 1. Weapons of Light, though, being nerfed to 25%, I personally just can't wrap my head around as to why they made that decision. Maybe they want you to be like either or on Well of Radiance or Ward of Dawn. It still wouldn't make sense in my mind if that was the thought process. It feels like something that's more for PvP in terms of why they made that change, because for PvE I personally just don't understand why they made that change. I see a lot of people saying, hey, you know, it's about time that they nerfed bubble titans, I'm so tired of running bubble. Well, it's in-game content. You're gonna want more damage, you're gonna want the ability to, you know, protect your teammates. That's the Titan's role in PvE. You are the shield, you are the tank, you do damage and you take damage so your teammates don't have to. That's the whole point. I feel like, I'm not a MMO player, but any MMO that I see out there, especially the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy 14, if you haven't already played it, it seems like anyone who plays the tank role, that is your role. You play the shield, and just nerfing your ability to not only, you know, buff your teammates. I mean, I personally don't see any reason to run Ward of Dawn now, considering it's the same buff as Well of Radiance. Personally, if I'm going to run Void in anything after this, it'll probably just be with the Commander Shield, the giant banner shield, because you'll be able to, first of all, create more super, because it constantly poops out orbs for taking damage, especially in in-game content like, you know, Grandmasters, where everything can basically try and one-shot you, especially now with the new content. They're going to be able to do more damage with the new Singe mechanic. Yeah, I just can't wrap my head around it. I'm probably going to be speccing into more volatile instead of defense for my Void Titan. You know, go for more Void explosions, have, you know, high or really low grenade cooldowns, maybe spec into melee, not Doom Marchers. Doomfang Pauldrons are definitely going to be like one of my top picks for next season, especially if you can go with a melee build, 1-2 punch, get your increase super for getting melee kills. It's just, I don't understand where they're going. I don't understand what kind of mentality shift they wanted players to have after hearing this. I bet, you know, certain people who, you know, once again didn't like, you know, being, you know, the quote unquote bubble guy. This is definitely going to put more pressure on Warlocks, because Titans aren't going to want to run bubble. You're going to probably see more Thunder Crashes out there, more Behemoths, especially with the new Titan exotic for bottom tree. You'll be getting more of those Sunspot Titans in PvE. And if you are playing Void Bubble, you're probably not using Ward of Dawn, because Ward of Dawn isn't even really getting Grandmasters right now. It's all Banner Shield. So if you are using Banner Shield, you're probably going Ursa's. Doomfang Pauldrons will probably be a top pick. I don't really know of any too many more Void centric. You'll probably see a lot of part of Inmost Light Titans in PvE. This is just one of those things where, like, I don't understand why they did this, but it is what it is. I can move on. I play Titan well enough to where I don't necessarily need bubble. It's more so for my team. I am a team player. When I try to get raids, we're just trying to get this shit done. I don't necessarily care. I mean, I play for fun, but at the same time, I really don't like failing encounters, and I really don't like spending any more time in an encounter than I necessarily have to, which is why I am willing to run bubble. But I mean, you know, other people have different ideas. Other people like to think differently. I just don't understand why people have an issue, considering a lot of MMOs, especially after a long time it's been up, a lot of people have already done the work, so you don't have to do too much thinking. You find a build and you spec into that build. Bungie is just, you know, new to the idea of, hey, build crafting. Eventually there's going to be the most optimal build. Bubble was one of the more optimal things for raids, and now might not necessarily be that way. So we'll see how the meta shifts in terms of PvE goes, but I definitely see, you know, more Titans that play Void specking into explosions for ad clear, especially those sunspots giving you the ability to heal your teammates. That new Behemoth Titan exotic. I mean, there are other ways that we can play support for our team and probably, you know, do more damage, and maybe this is the death of Ward of Dawn outside of PvP. So it is what it is. We'll see what happens. All right, we did another little skip, so let's see about the synergy between Void and Arc Souls.
At 36 minutes, we hear Bungie talk about the Warlock animation when you actually have an Arc and Void Soul at the same time. And the question was actually brought up by Mylan. It was like, yo, can you be your own army? Like, what if you were standing in your friend's Arc Soul Rift, and then you happen to be rocking Child of the Old Gods with Void 3.0, and you pop your Rift? And then, what if you were using No Time to Explain, spawning that Sentinel to go in there and help you kill things? You will essentially have
Absolutely
three little fighter buddies
terrifying
next to you. Now, Kevin brought up here that they actually spent a lot of time on this, but supposedly there's going to be some sort of unique animation and interaction between Arc and Void Souls at the same time.
I mean, for PvP, this is probably going to be an absolute nightmare, especially if you get all three of your basically battle buddies at this point, ready and rared and go. You got your Arc Soul, you got your Void Soul, you got your No Time to Explain Soul. Whenever the Solar Soul decides to come up out of nowhere, it's going to be a nightmare in PvP, especially with the range of the Child of the Old God, especially if you get close with someone. It's with the weakening effect, I can see a lot of size in my near future. On top of PvE, this is going to be helpful because maybe you could have like 2 warlocks. One will be Arc, one will be Void. One has his Child of the Old Gods giving weakening effects to every enemy. Everybody else has their Arc Soul ready and go. You step into that Warlock's Rift. And then you have the new Warlock exotic boots, which I've already forgotten the name, giving you Devour on top of Overload rounds. It might be a just very lethal combination for ad clear. It sounds great, especially if you can keep the uptime of the Child of the Old Gods running and raring to go. I don't know what the cooldown is tied to, but overall it gets a neat for me.
At an hour and 17 minutes, Void weapons all should synergize with Void 3.0. The same thing goes for Arc and Solar 3.0 when they release. The main thing is that Void weapons will apply volatile. Essentially, they're going to be volatile rounds. So be prepared for lots of Void explosions. And this, of course, will synergize with whatever you're using in your Void 3.0 kit.
This will be the final point that I comment on in terms of this video. Once again, if you want to see his full thoughts on Void 3.0, I was just using it as a reference for my personal talking points, but this just makes sense, you know, because stasis has some stasis synergy when it comes down to the stasis of weapons. Now, arguably, it's not as aggressive as so far what I hear when it comes down to Void weapons, because you have to have like things like Headstone in order to get that stasis synergy, but you never know, we might get some more stasis perks coming next season as well. But being able to proc volatile with your weapons, on top of being able to build into that, especially for me as a Titan, that's going to help me a lot. Weapons like Graviton Lance, which is getting a 40% buff next season against rank and file enemies. That volatile being able to proc, especially against those rank and file enemies, and then you proc that on higher rank enemies. It's going to be kind of nasty. Ruinous Effigy. And there are plenty of other Void weapons on there that are even, especially legendary weapons. I don't know how that's going to help when it comes down to snipers, but I feel like this is another season where your Null Composure might see a little bit more work, especially considering that it has a Void Explosion all on its own. You might see a little bit more play. I believe fusion rifles are getting a buff in terms of the high impact ones. So Glacial Chasm, if you have that one with Reservoir Burst, especially if you have the one that I have that I painstakingly had to grind for, throwing cookies in everyone's mouth with Reservoir Burst and Subsistence, it may actually put in some good amount of work. Overall, honestly, most of these changes are good. I'm still confused about the Titan change. Hunters, you know, are going to be hunting. Warlocks are going to be warlocking. As a Titan main, I am excited. At least for the build crafting for Volatile. Unfortunately, it looks like Bubble is just going to be dead for me next season unless someone proves me otherwise. But yeah, those have been my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts on Void 3.0 as well as this TWAB and the new exotics that are coming next season. My name has been Soul Games. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.